divine remembrance. The object of our remembrance in the sublime path to self-realization is God. Alluding to ordinary people mired in the affairs of the world, it may be said that our minds are absorbed every moment in thinking about various problems of our material life and are seldom directed towards God, except when we are in deep distress or misery. The reason is that we attach primary importance to our worldly interest alone, which constantly remains in our view. Thus we remain entangled within the Maya without ever thinking of it at any stage. According to dictionary, remembrance of the divine constantly is of course to remember the object of remembrance continuously without a break. Realization is very easy if one only diverts one's attention towards it. That means one must have a deep impression of it upon one's heart. The deeper the impression, the quicker and easier shall be the success. Not much remains to be done when one has done so much. Taking in of this impression means imbibing of the very thing one aspires for. In that case, the divine thought will continuously remain alive in one's heart, and his attention will be drawn towards it all the while. This is what remembrance of the divine exactly means. If we are just going through the practice of meditation by sitting in the morning, evening and at night before going to bed and keep ourselves occupied with worldly concerns alone for the rest of the day, we are in effect cutting ourselves from the divine for most of the time. We should endeavor to keep that contact intact even while we are busy with our daily duties. If we divert our attention towards God and feel realization as the primary object of our life, naturally we shall begin to look upon it as the first and foremost thing in comparison to everything else in the world. In other words, once we have decided that realization is the important aim of our life, then we need to bring the idea of the Divine Master and God more prominently into our life. In such a scenario, we should be able to realize that the 30 to 60 minutes of meditation in the morning cannot possibly be adequate. Some sadhakas might feel that this will lead to neglect of our worldly duties. They may also feel that as a result their material interests may suffer and they might be left behind in the competition of life. This apprehension betrays a lack of understanding of the concept of divine remembrance constantly. Establishing a link with the divine does not mean moving away from the path of duty towards our affairs in this world. In fact, our sublime path does not mean neglecting this world for the other world. On the other hand, it strongly advocates that a sadhaka should do his worldly duties with equal attention and meticulously. It does not mean that we should become unmindful of our worldly responsibilities and neglect our duty in that respect, causing misery and trouble to those depending upon us for support. We must remain alive to our sense of duty to them as much as to God, but without any undue attachment. For this, we must snatch a few minutes from our hours of rest and pray to God with a sincere heart for His guidance and support on the path of duty. If we do this regularly with a heart full of love and devotion, the prayer shall not go unheard. Divine remembrance constantly or frequently remembering God is not all that difficult. It does not mean that one should do nothing or do anything else but concentrate on remembering God to the neglect of our worldly duties. Some people think that constant or even frequent remembrance of God is not practicable when a man in life is surrounded by numerous worries and anxieties caused by worldly attachments and responsibilities. But practice and experience will prove to them that it is a very easy process and can be followed by any and everyone in spite of all worries and engagements, only if they divert their attention towards God in a real sense. The notion of the Guru as a doer in your place, or the practice of substituting the Divine Master as the doer in your place, brings numerous benefits. It not only brings about constant remembrance of the Divine, it also helps one to avoid the temptation to do what one should not be doing, because the power of the Guru begins to flow into you, and in the process will lose the temptation to do the wrong act. Thirdly, it prevents the formation of fresh samskaras. It is not an ordinary thing to be achieved easily. It begins after complete negation of all senses and faculties, for which we proceed by elementary rules of devotion. We should love the Master with faith and reverence, trying by all means to attract his attention and favor. For this purpose, we connect our link with him in the light of the worldly relationship only for the sake of facility. We think of him as Father, Mother, Brother, Master and Beloved. The process, if taken up in right earnest, is greatly helpful to a disciple. The strong link of attraction thus established leads one to a state of devotion and surrender. To stress further on this point, you have to work, but forget you are a human being. Think of the Divine Master, and then he begins to work through you. Forget you are a human being. Work in his remembrance. Then the miracle happens that his power works through you. Although the link with the Guru and substituting him for self is initially taken up to facilitate constant divine remembrance, it ultimately leads to surrender and establishment of a permanent bond of love and affection between the Guru and the disciple. In other words, what is taken up as a supposition leads to a permanent bond between the Master and the disciple, and thus opens the way for further spiritual progress by the disciple. An important and significant distinction is drawn between the physical form and his inner self and the divine essence of and in the Guru. The process of remembrance, if earnestly followed, will constantly keep the Master's form in your vision, and you will feel his presence within and all about. Though in fact the real Master is not merely his outward physical form alone as the Master, but his inner self. Still, it is almost impossible to ignore the form altogether. But those who stick to the idea of the physical form alone as the Master create for themselves the grossest entanglements and complications. But if the Master is a great divine soul who has secured his merger in absolute reality, meditation on his form is by far of greatest advantage to the disciples. His body, though gross in outward appearance, is really as fine and subtle in character as his inner self. If you meditate on the form of such a divine Master, you not only begin to lose your own grossness, but also begin to imbibe within you the finest condition of his inner self. The form taken up in view will after some time disappear from the sight, and you will gradually embark on the plane of pure reality. Great importance is attached to developing love for Master and surrender to him in the sublime path to self-realization. How should a sadhaka develop love for him? If we practice this constant remembrance, love for Master will develop automatically. If we love someone, we do not have to make an effort to remember that person. Remembrance in this case is automatic. If we remember someone continuously, we will automatically develop love for that person. This is the secret of remembrance. It makes us forget ourselves. When we forget ourselves, we forget our problems, our pains, our sufferings. And at the same time, because of our remembering Him, love for Him also grows. Love becomes established and surrender becomes possible. When surrender is established, there is nothing left to be done. Remembering Him gives us double benefit. It removes our suffering and makes surrender possible. So it must be constant to keep the divine current flowing, to effect the stoppage of formation of samskaras through His remembrance.